Hi, I'm Sam. About 5 years ago, my whole world was turned upside down. More on that later, but let's just say in what was supposed to be the happiest time in my life, I felt totally lost. You're listening to or watching my show, where we'll be talking with friends in healthcare, wellness, and holistic healing about real self-care. I'm not talking about pedicures and bubble baths. We're talking true acts of care to maintain our physical and mental health so we can truly live fearlessly and fulfilled. Say it with me. Self-care is my job. Okay, here we are. Yay. Episode 2. It's not episode 200, but it's episode 2. I mean, I'm
Gotta start somewhere.
So as promised, I have a friend with me tonight. I'm so excited. So this is my friend Lisa Drew. She is a psychotherapist, a personal development coach, focusing specifically on life transitions. So, and works mostly with women, which is very aligned, obviously, with what I do, which again, yoga instructor and a self-care mentor for moms on my end. So this is going to be great because hopefully we can have some conversations. One of the things that I was really looking forward to talking about with Lisa is when things just go awry in life, like when the shit hits the fan, right? And when enter COVID, enter crazy, right? So hi Lisa. So me and Lisa are friends, but I'm welcoming her to my show.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you're doing this. This is it's a perfect forum for you, I feel,
I'm starting to get really excited about it. I'm not gonna lie.
It's right in line there,
And then I also realized this week too, I was like, you know what? With the little ones running around, if I could just write all day, I would. I really, really would. I love to write and I love to journal. I probably have a book all over this board, just with little things already. But I can't make time to write. And now I'm starting to realize with this that I'm like, oh, so for as far as at least of getting what I want to say out and focusing on what I want to, get out into the world, I'll just talk. Yay.
Yeah.
Let's just get it all out.
It's like organic, it's just like whatever is just bubbling up can come out. You don't have to edit yourself, with the whole writing process. So
exactly. Oh God. And I will do that over and over again. I will strive for perfection when I'm writing. And that's when the perfectionism creeps in and it's a real buzzkill. Let me tell you, I'll be so excited about something. And then it's that fear comes in of do you put something out there, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yes, we could talk about perfectionism for years.
Yes, for the eternity, right? Which really might honestly come into play when we're talking about this tonight. So my thought process, and especially given sort of my intro episode, if you didn't listen to the first episode, it was just sort of me giving my backstory, which was that essentially about 5 years ago when I had my first kid, I was very abruptly pushed out, very short recap, very abruptly pushed out of the corporate world. I was in publishing for over 10 years, which Lisa has heard this story before. And I was laid off when I was 8 months pregnant. So big old belly, just out the door. Totally unexpected. I didn't expect to have a stay-at-home mom lifestyle. And in a nutshell, keeping it short, through, adjusting to a new lifestyle as far as no longer having my corporate career and the new lifestyle of being a mom for the first time in my life at the same time threw me into a bit of a pickle. And mentally, I lost it. So, I say that sort of in jest now, because in retrospect, I can say without a shadow of a doubt was meant to happen. And it brought me to where I am today. And it brought me very specifically to the realization of how important wellness and self-care is, because had I not started to almost unknowingly prioritize those things in that moment or in that time frame of my life, I would have never gotten through it. So that's why I decided that maybe we could talk about that, the idea of that major life transition, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess, in my head, first to ask you is there are small things that can happen that could really throw you off. that could almost throw you off, and correct me if I'm wrong, as much as a big thing. It just depends, right? On like what your relationships in your life, the your mental state that you're in when things change or whatever it is. So in other words, example, right? A layoff or a pandemic. Like, so yeah, like, so it's funny, like, so, and it makes me think of the idea of when you're going through something, it feels like it's the end of the world.
Right.
So it could be something, I don't know if in the moment, obviously it didn't feel small when I was laid off in that major transition or whatever, or it could be the end of a relationship, like a breakup, so, and, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, of when, the shit hits the fan and it feels like it's the end of the world, but then maybe when you get beyond it, you get over that hump, and then maybe in retrospect, it's like, holy shit, like I was able, I did figure it out, didn't I? Like I really did, but in the moment, it felt like crazy down.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know from my own experience, of course. I think the first thing that popped into my head when you started to describe like how, sort of alluding to the fact that there's like a difference, right, between shit hitting the fan and stuff that's maybe a little bit what most people would consider like less significant. But the word that came into my mind was judgment. And I think what happens is, whether it's something monumental, like I think we can all agree the pandemic is,
totally
like off the charts, or, like breaking up with a shitty boyfriend, not, less of a big deal. But when we judge the experience, we are already setting ourselves up for, setting these unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Whether it's we are minimizing that this is really not a big deal, and therefore whatever feelings that we have associated with that change, we're judging it, we're evaluating it, and hence we're just exacerbating our anxiety, right? So you're always just better off coming to some acceptance as quickly as possible, like accepting it is what it is. I feel sad about this. I feel disappointed that this relationship didn't work out. Like, acknowledge it rather than judge it. I think that's like first problem, so we can take something, whether it's big or small, depending on how you're evaluating it, and we can make it worse or we can make it better. I mean, it really is all about your perception of the situation. But first things first is like, you got to not judge yourself, which I know we all do.
Yeah.
But go easy on yourself. That's what I would always say to myself and to other people. It's just like, you're going to make it feel a lot worse if you immediately try to jump in with your ego mind and say, this isn't really a big deal,
Ooh, she said a key word. She said the ego mind. Because I was literally just going to respond and say, it's all perception, right? Like, you can paint the picture of something any way you want, and when your ego takes over. So basically, you're, the yogi mind, right? That part, coming into my brain here is like, there's this sort of veil of perception over everything that you have an outlook that's in front of you, right? And they are vrittis, or our mental modifications, like our anxieties, basically, or our triggers, will, based off of past experiences mostly, will come in and color this thing that's happening to you one way. And our worries about the future, so you have your anxieties or your fears or your regrets, from the past, and your worries about the future, that'll come in. So in other words, and it colors it all. So then you're judging it instead of seeing it for what it really is. That's right. Why I always loved that from yoga training. My teacher was just amazing, and she used to talk about this veil of perception. And I was like, I remember the first time she said it, and I was like, what is she talking about? Like, what? And the more she talked about it, it was like, bing, like, holy cow, like, you don't. So I mean, a true light bulb went off for me at that point, and I think I started to view things differently and realize that fear and anxiety coming out when you're faced with a situation is so much about the past, the future, and external factors, like you said, judgment, what people are going to think, how you're going to navigate that stuff, as opposed to like, what are the things that I can do in this moment actively that will make this easier on myself, or whatever it might, or easier on my kids, or easier on my family, or whatever it is. But yeah, we have these little triggers, right, that come from the past or the future, and they just like cloud it all up. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's anxiety is like that in the sense that for the most part, if you remove that piece from someone, if you're able to like give yourself a lobotomy and take it out, most of us can handle what's thrown at us. It's the thoughts and the judgments and evaluations that we apply to our situation that creates the anxiety.
Right.
You know, rather than just saying, okay, this happened, this is how I feel. Now let me see, you know, what I can do about it and what's out of my control and all that. We start heaping on all the what ifs, right? And oh my God, what does this mean? And what will happen next? And oh, what if this? And you know, like it's just we are the problem, you know,
Yeah.
but we're also the solution. So that's the good news.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
We are the problem, we are also the solution. That is so friggin' true. Because it's like, I always say this too, it's like the answer is already in you, but you just have to, it's like the unclouding that needs to happen. It's so hard sometimes. And I always say this too, like I think it's okay to be like really pissed off for a day, and like, you know what I mean? Like I try to make sure that that's like part of my conversations with people too, of like, listen, if you want to like, if you need to have a day of just like, you're irrational, you're just like cursing and angry and bitter, as long as you can be aware of it the next day and get your shit together. Because there's, you know, like there's always that thought process too of like, all right, but I need to be able to feel my feelings. I need to be able to like react.
It's a fine line. It is, because, you know, and I hear you. Like there is that line as a therapist too, between whether I'm dealing with myself, family, loved ones, or clients, of wanting to validate an experience, because that is your experience and it's your perception. And, you know, I'm sort of walking along the side with someone. At the same time, if we look at things just from the way our brain works, there's actually a lot of science that tells us taking that day to vent and be pissed off is actually counterproductive. So when you are, so, and I get it. The thing is that especially if you're prone to any of the things that, you know, you and I talk about all the time, like the anxiety and the perfectionism and procrastination, you can really start digging yourself a hole. Because, not to get into a whole like neurobiology lesson here, but your brain is always taking in information, okay? And it wants to prove your thoughts correct. So if you are having this bummed out day and you're screwing up left and right, and you're like, I'm just gonna make this my, you know, my pissy day, and tomorrow I'll get back on track. The thing is that when you have that mindset, you're actually reinforcing this belief of, you know, whatever was happening that day, I can't handle the situation. I have no control over my emotions. I need to succumb to whatever unhealthy coping skills I have. And it's okay for me to eat this whole cake because tomorrow I'll get back on track. You see what I'm saying? So anytime that you are pissed off for more than 20 minutes, it's because a core issue was triggered. Because anger, the emotion itself, very real, very normal, natural, nothing wrong with it. Like any other emotion, is actually pretty fleeting. So if we're hanging on to it and feeding it throughout the day with this attitude of like, I deserve to feel like this today, or I'm entitled in some way, you actually do make it worse.
I don't know, I'm telling you, teach me, because it's funny. Well, it actually, as you're talking about that too, it's like, on the other hand, I normally do, you know, recommend, you know, when I'm talking about this with anyone, it's like, at the same time, don't make it worse for yourself by, you know, saying, I need a frigging drink, and that turns into 5 or 6, you know what I mean? And then now the next day you're miserable and you can't pull yourself out of that hole because you feel awful, just as an example of like, oh,
Right.
this has been a day, or this is a disaster. Let me self-medicate in some way, or reach out for something that's a band-aid that might actually make it worse, because again, you're not addressing it. It's about, I think it all comes down to awareness, like full awareness of what's happening. But it's easier said than done sometimes, for sure.
Yeah,
um,
because when you're in the thick of it, it's very hard to stay mindful and tease apart, what's my stuff and what's external stuff that I really don't need to be concerning myself with. And, something you said when you were right after the introduction, it does depend on where you're at physically and emotionally. If you're just coming out of a sinus infection and you're up all night with your baby who's sick, and you have problems in your relationship and you can't pay the bills, you're really not in the best position
right.
to go, wait a minute, self, like it's very hard to do. So that self-care that you talk about is so important, continuously ongoing. I tell people it's like, it has to be like brushing your teeth.
It's
Even though you
self-preservation.
don't have book in your teeth, you still brush them every day, like because it's preventative. So you don't want to get to that point where stuff is like heaped up so high that it's very hard to pull yourself out of. It's
Totally.
tough.
I read something. It was the first time I ever read self-care as described as self-preservation the other day. And I was like,
Right.
yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is literally preparing, being prepared for when the shit hits the fan, because it's gonna. And you know what? Not only do you know it's gonna, it's probably gonna happen in threes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's probably gonna be like bing, bing, bing. Because isn't that always what happens? Like, I almost, again, like I said, I just want to write. I almost just wrote something the other day about it, where I was thinking like, um, it's always like, it's literally like, when is the last time just like one shitty thing has happened? Like in a 6 month span, or like, I feel like it's always like that. Not necessarily the rule of three, but always like, damn, when it rains, it pours, man. But then again, that very well might be just sort of a spiraling of one thing into another, because we're not in control of our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts. So, you lose your job, and then you have a major fight with your boyfriend, and then that relationship's over because all type of shit comes up that you needed to address that you weren't. And then that relationship. So it's like, you think, but again, it goes back to self-care. It actually does, because if you were prepared to deal with the first shit that went off, the first bomb, and like, if you were mentally and physically at least prepped and relatively sound in that area, it doesn't necessarily need to spiral. It doesn't need to become a problem. So yeah, it just, I like the idea of pulling that together. Because, when I think about, from a personal level, right? So totally, and I'm back to judgment, because when I'm thinking about my story, thinking about my experience, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the COVID experience, but my seemingly minuscule life transition at age 30 of being laid off at the same time as having my daughter. Yes, absolutely. In that moment, I have to say, like, I almost, in that moment of when I went into the room and I had the conversation, and they were telling me I was being let go, I already knew. Like, I was already telling people, like, this is happening. And sometimes I think about that and I'm like, did I somehow manifest that? I don't know, because of just, what it could have been anything. It could have been my own personal fears of being a working mom and managing both. It could have been so much there. And then in addition to that, yes, absolutely, in the moment, and actually dealing with it, and having it register like, holy crap, like, that's it. Like, because you're not getting a new job right away. You're 8 months pregnant. You're not finding a new job right away when you have a little tiny infant at home. Like this might be it. And that realization, which was very scary for me, but there was so much judgment in that, because having no idea what it was going to be like on the other side of motherhood, like that was my first step into it. So I couldn't even have any real perception of what this was going to be like. So all I could do was paint a picture of what I thought it might be like. And having never thought,
that's deadly right there.
Exactly. I think that's why it was like, oh my, like, you know, I have nothing to go off of here.
Yeah, no frame of reference, sure.
And also the idea of, you know, when we're talking about hard judgment here, I'm totally open about this now, because in retrospect, I laugh at myself. Like, I was so like relatively green when it came to motherhood and even like the life of a working mom, right? So I did 100% have some sort of like view about stay-at-home mom lifestyle that terrified me. That fucking terrified me. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, that's not me. Like, that's not me. Like, I have this career. Like, and please, I could talk your ear off about, you know, that idea of how like the corporate career like gave me this like sort of false sense of importance or whatever, and go down that road. But you know what I mean? Like, it was like, oh, you know, again, and it's judging myself, because now it's like, well, what the hell are you if you don't have this anymore? You don't have this career that you put all of your juice into, you know?
Right.
And that's gone now. And so what are you? Like, what are you? Just a mom? That's the space mentally that I was in for at least 8 months. At least 8 months. So it's just, you know, you can just decide, or not decide really, but you can get stuck. You know?
Well, what you're speaking to, and this is why I think most people at some point in their lives are going to struggle with some kind of transition, is that it changes our identity. It changes our view of ourselves. And you know, to add the extra layer, you had some negative judgments about stay-at-home moms, you know? And so then when you found yourself in that position, it was like, oh, like a double gross, you know? So, but yeah, when we have to change gears like that, especially when it's not by our choice, it throws off everything about who we think we are, who we think we should be, how people, whether they accept us, whether they validate that part of who we say we are, right? I mean, you know, and who are we? What are we? Like, if we get all metaphysical here, you know, I mean, it's really just the persona we put out into the world. We are everything and nothing, essentially, if we're looking at it from, you know, that standpoint.
You know, so, I love to talk about that stuff. So
I know. Well, even like when you were talking about, you know, the energy that you can bring to a situation, and you're like, did I manifest this? I'm like, maybe, you know, because
seriously, I mean, you can think, you know, like when I started really doing some retrospective thinking about it, I was like, there's so much. Like, there's so much to unpack there. Like, what was happening? Like, did I want it? Did I, like, you know, like, did I really actually, did I know that this needed to happen? That I needed to go down my own road? Because, you know, ultimately, and this is something we can talk about too, how do you grow? How do you grow once you're beyond that shit hits the fan moment, and maybe you come to some sense of awareness and you get grounded? How do you grow? Like, so for me, like I said, I was in that sort of sad, dark place for quite some time. And for me, you know, I'm a Virgo, like, this is how it works. Like, I'll just tolerate like something for a really extensively long amount of time. And then I'll hit a wall, boom. And I wake up one day and I'm like, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. And that's what happened. So I started to radically incorporate acts of self-care into my life. And I rattled a lot of cages when I started doing it, because when
Oh,
you
yeah.
start making some changes after that, period of time where people are used to seeing you in a certain function,
Hmm.
it rattles some cages. But so I think that I started my growth process beyond that transition out of, I don't want to say like desperation, but like I said, I hit a wall. I really did. Like I couldn't go down that road anymore. So I needed self-care, and I didn't know I needed self-care, but I just started saying, I need to have more girls' nights out. I need to be around my friends more. I need to get away from the kids more. I need to have space. I need more yoga, and I needed more wine. And I don't mean like more wine, like more drinking. I just needed more socializing and more
Yeah.
celebration and more joy and connection. And yeah, and of course, as a mom, when you start prioritizing those things, not necessarily over your family, but in more so in order to feel whole, so that you could really be there in as wholeheartedly for your family. You rattle some cages, but that's how I grew, and that's how I got to where I am now, because I'm so adamant and passionate about sharing the concept and message of prioritizing self-care, because it freaking saved me. It's everything. So but yeah, like, so that's my question, I guess, is like, how, at what point, I mean, it's different for everybody, I'm sure, but what would be the ideal mindset to be able to grow from it,
Huh.
or whatever you were going to say.
No,
Like,
I mean, I think that a lot of it is awareness, but also, when you talk about hitting that wall, um, think about the way our culture is, right? Our culture does not support us learning and growing from experiences. It says play it safe, go work for the man, get your college degree, go make, if you're, really super smart, you get the Ivy League, and you're going to work on Wall Street and you make a lot of money and you'll have a good career. Like, nothing in our culture prepares us. Nothing in our culture also encourages us to tap into and listen to the gift that all of us are born with, which is our intuition. So everything in our lives sort of set us up on autopilot, the antithesis of what's needed to have that awareness, to know whether or not we are living a life that is aligned with who we really are. So it's not until we run smack into the wall, or we get fired, or we have a terrible accident, we're diagnosed with an illness, that we go, oh, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, it's just unfortunate that it has to come to that sometimes. But what's the alternative? The alternative is, you will just keep going on in misery, infecting everyone around you. So I think that there's consequences on both ends. But to your question, I just think that it is difficult in this culture. Maybe as moms with young children, we can try to start, kind of grooming them that it's normal to whatever people do. But for me, it's meditate. For you, it's yoga, and there's overlap there. To just learn how to be still.
mm,
Nobody wants to be still. You and I've talked about this before too. When you're still, you're not working, you're not producing, you're not good
yeah.
enough. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
But learning how to just be still and okay with whatever is going on between the ears is like, part of the cure, really.
Totally.
Um, yeah,
That's how you
but
get
our
ahead of
culture does
it.
not set us up for success. So we have to work against that, which is
Well,
not
it's
easy.
exactly what you said about following your intuition. So that's, like, for me, what I've realized over time too is that through certain forms of self-care, I think you can cultivate that through different forms of self-care. For me, um, I mean, yoga is definitely a big part of it, because for me, in my, 13 or 14 years of practicing yoga, it's like, I didn't realize it was happening while it was happening, but it got me comfortable with the stillness. And when you're still and you can be comfortable and you can be quiet, you can start to listen to what's going on in your body and in your mind, and not run from it and start to nurture it and start to really to notice and then listen. And as soon as you start to be able to actually take those cues from yourself that you need this, you're feeling, it starts out so simple, right? Like you're in the class, even if you were in a meditation class too, same thing, where the teacher is guiding you ideally to make any adjustments you might need to feel more comfortable. Ideally, right? There are some teachers who might not do that, but I would, where it's like, I don't care how you want to sit. I don't care how it looks. I want you. So even getting into a yoga pose where it's like, okay, you get into the basis of the shape and then you refine until it feels good for you, and you modify and you make any adjustments you need till it feels good for you. So even if it's just making that a habit, you start to make that a habit. The more you do it, of like listening to your body and doing it your way. So as soon as you bring that in, the yoga, meditation. For me, it was also music, because I sing and I write, like super amateur. Like I'm still 4 years later.
Stop it.
Myself.
Stop it.
Like I'm like, at what point am I like? I mean, I'm like, banging on the keys, 4-chord songs. Anyway, I don't care. As long as I can accompany myself, I don't like, please, my goal is not to be some friggin' world-renowned pianist. It's literally just to accompany myself so that I can sing. Because when I sing, there is some very strange thing that happens where I am more myself than I ever am in any other moment, right? Because it's like, that is all me. It's coming straight out of me, and whatever is coming out of me is ideally, unless I'm really trying to emanate Lady Gaga or something, like ideally what's coming out of me is all me. Like that's how I wanted it to come out, or maybe it's just how it was meant to come out and that's it. So that's why when you incorporate things like that too, that are like a form of creative self-care, or a form of self-care that is going to allow you to cultivate a hobby or a passion or a skill or talent or something creative, whatever it is, and you can connect with yourself and you honor yourself by doing that. So it's like things like that I think are so important, again, to get ahead of these situations, because when you cultivate all that into your life and you are used to being in line with that's your intuition. Like, so doing something your way, that's your intuition. So you're following it. So you make that a habit. You get comfortable with doing it, so that when the shit hits the fan, you are like, okay, this feels crazy. But like, again, we have the answers inside of us, but we can't listen. We can't listen unless we're still, and we're used to listening, and we haven't lost the ability to feel comfortable listening. So it's, totally, it makes sense to go down that line of thought.
I love your description of how yoga really not only, kind of helped you tune in, but just your explanation is it's like profound but simplistic, right? It's we don't listen to our bodies, and yoga actually is what did it for me too. And that's so important. And it's now part of the work that I do when I went on to study trauma and somatic experiencing and felt sense. Essentially, a lot of it comes down to breathing exercises and body scans and, recognizing whatever sensations, whatever you're feeling within your body. And that is like the best place to start, as you say, just getting in the practice of going. Like, I'll even tell people, although I try to encourage people to be off their phones, but also use their notifications, because if you're not accustomed to it, like the little kids who they forget to drink enough water or forget to go potty, they have those watches. So I tell people, I'm like, on your phone, set a reminder, set it to go off like every couple of hours to start. And when it pings, that's when you're going to go, how am I doing? Like just get that cue going to remind you to start building that new habit. And then eventually you won't need the phone so much, but it has to be.
I bet you that's a quicker route to make it a habit, because it's literally set in your agenda in your life, than you know, 7 years of yoga or whatever it was for me, you know, like, but
Well,
you know,
no,
it's like a
they're
very
actually,
slow build, right? Like,
yeah, but that's actually like behavior psychology,
yeah,
pairing, think of like Pavlov's dog and other
totally, yeah.
experiments that, we've heard of like a million years ago in Psych 101. But essentially, so that the ping goes off, the message goes to the brain, it's time for me to do a body scan. Like there are little things that you can do to basically build your habits faster. And it has to do with just psychology and behavior. One thing I do want to bring up though, that kind of complicates things for people, when you were describing, sort of learning to listen to that innate need of what your body needs at that point. There's something though that can throw people off, and that is trauma. So when I'm working with people, mostly in the therapeutic capacity, not so much with the coaching, but I always want to encourage the person to explore any history of trauma. And a lot of people, and initially when I started learning about it too, I was like, trauma? The only thing I thought associated with trauma was like veterans and like 9/11 and these, catastrophic worldwide events. But what people don't realize is a lot of it comes down to perception, your genetic wiring, all these things, how you perceive different types of events. So what you may consider traumatic, my brain does not. My nervous system will not respond the way yours does. So when people start developing that habit of tuning into their bodies and doing those scans, and as you say, the shit hits the fan, the problem with trauma is your brain does not know the difference between like a real threat or a perceived threat. And if you have that history of trauma, you can sure as hell bet that that person's brain, the amygdala, is going to fire up and it's going to respond with survival. It's going to go back to those old habits that people, may have used to help them cope, right? So that's why so many people, even now with what's going on with the pandemic, they find themselves, like I work more with the eating disorder population, people in recovery for eating disorders and things. And, they're like, I have been fine for like 2 decades. Or people who are suddenly starting to drink more, or people who are suddenly, they're dabbling in substances and things like that. Because your brain's going to go back to whatever avoidance or whatever you did to cope. Does that make sense? So it's like, you really have to build that self-care in so that your brain at least gives you that pause, you know what I mean? So that you can make a choice. Because otherwise it's almost like automatic that we revert back to old behaviors, which is unfortunate, but that's where the yoga and the mindfulness and meditation, all that comes in, because it gives you that space to go, all right, wait a minute. I can do that, but I can also do this, this, and this,
Right. And it'll also give you the pause that you need to notice when those old habits and patterns start to creep back in.
Right.
Like I even feel like this was just happening for me because I mean it not in anything major as far as like, some major traumatic thing coming back to me or whatever, but old patterns and habits. Like we talked about it. We have talked about at length the perfectionism, the procrastinating, things like that. And it's been, I don't have to explain. I mean, this whole COVID experience, especially with the kids and the virtual learning and everything for a parent specifically, not to exclude everybody else, but man, if you got kids through this thing, shit, I don't even know. I just keep going, am I a candy camera?
I know.
A joke?
This can't be for real.
Like, time out. Like, this can't be real. So, and you got to joke, right? You got to joke. But point is so you fall back into these patterns, and it's been this roller coaster that I felt, I think I got so used to this roller coaster that we're on that I didn't notice I went down a little further on the, 1 or 2 rounds ago, right? 1 or 2 loops back. And I stayed there for a little longer than I expected to. And, it was a good week or more before I realized, oh, probably 2, before I realized, oh, that's why. See, now I'm beating myself up because I'm not working on my business enough, and I'm not making enough time, and I'm not on my yoga mat enough, and I'm not, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing this. So what do I hear there? Once I'm able to have that pause, so I start to incorporate my self-care back. I start to realize, okay, you gotta start listening to what's going on with you right now. And what did I realize? Of course, that I wasn't, I wasn't specifically making enough time away from the kids. Like, I realized that, we're stuck in a lot of the time. We're still social distancing on a medium to high level over here.
Yeah.
So not creating that space for myself, like there were certain things that I wasn't doing as far as self-care that I needed to come back into in order to level myself out. And because I wasn't doing that, I went right back into my perfectionism and procrastinating and telling myself, well, like, you can't do, unless you can execute that perfectly, like, just don't friggin' do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes in, and then you have the other layer of that, of not feeling enough, like just not, not being able to sit in stillness and say, I can just be, like, I'm enough, even if I just do nothing right now. It doesn't matter, oh, I'm not working on my business enough, I'm not yogaing enough, I'm not doing, stop beating yourself up, you're already enough. So all these habits like compiled on top of each other, which is probably why it was a good 2-week little blip for me, that I was like, ooh, girls, I need a night out. I need help.
It's almost like you have to, what's that?
I probably talked to you in the midst of that also. But, it's noticing. It's not like you not ever, oh, you're the queen of self-care and you're always going to be at the tip top of your game. Probably not. Probably not when a pandemic comes in and throws your shit off your rocker and the shit hits the fan. No, you're probably going to have a blip here or there. It's just being able to become self-aware, I think, and notice. But that self-care has to come kind of like first. You have to be ahead of it.
Yeah, almost like you need to counterbalance, right? So
Totally. I've gotten to a habit where it's just like I'm having a week or a day or whatever it is. And it's like, as much as that it might feel like I'm having that week or that day or whatever it is because I haven't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. But a lot of times I'm realizing, like, when I get to a certain point of feeling that way, instead of saying, okay, let me do that thing, I actually need to go downstairs and sit right here and like light some incense and close my friggin' eyes for, and just, sometimes it's just Shavasana for like 15 minutes. Like,
where's mom?
Wherever I need. And it's like,
yeah,
I'm like,
that's good that you're able to see that and do that, though, because, the inclination is to push harder. The inclination for most of us is not to take a step back and go, whoa.
Right.
So
that's exactly what I mean, is like I would have never been like that. I would have never reacted that way 4 years ago. Never.
Right.
It would have just been continually beating myself up, inducing anxiety until I, until I accomplished that thing. And then I probably still wouldn't feel good about it because it probably wouldn't still feel good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and so, I mean, I could still see it, I still remember.
Well, compassion, that's the thing. It's like, and I may have talked to you about it or posted something about it, but it wasn't too long ago that I was kind of going down too. And I didn't immediately recognize, that my avoidance strategy is to like overwork, I just will dump every ounce of energy into that one thing, and it was the other piece for me is judgment start to come into play. And I start to feel jealous of certain people, and I start to go, oh yeah, oh, they don't have it so hard or something, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And then I catch myself. So, I mean, when I always feel like the benefit for me that I've experienced through the meditation and other things is that I catch myself faster than I would have in the past. And then the added piece that's very helpful is that when I catch myself, I'm not like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. I'm like, oh man, there you go again, girl. You know what I mean? Like I just,
Yeah.
oh, you're feeling like you're not good enough. So you're working super hard. And that's why you're nitpicking everybody around you. And it's because, you know, and I go, and I
Right.
can kind of see that little person.
Generally will spiral, but you can catch it. There's
Yeah.
a book, what is it? The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That talks about that a lot. The idea of, you know, feeling shitty and then feeling shitty for feeling shitty
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. And you're like, nah, not really a productive path to go down.
No.
Now that you put it that way, yeah, no, it's not good.
I was listening to a webinar today on positive parenting because, you know, even though I know better, I don't always do better. And this situation is tough and it doesn't always bring out the best in people, myself included. So I'm listening to this webinar and what the woman said is exactly that too, as it relates to parenting, is like, if you're yelling at somebody for doing something wrong or their misbehavior or something, when does making someone feel worse? Like if they already feel bad, when does making them feel worse actually help the situation? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, even when I can see it in myself, I don't always see it in my behavior towards somebody else. So it's just like constantly, I think, you know, when you asked earlier, how does a person grow? Well, sometimes it's like our circumstances give us a choice. We can either dig our heels in and stay pig-headed and not learn anything, or we can find the silver lining. But I think also like it's on us, if we want to feel good and healthy, to actively keep educating ourselves too. You know, like, I mean, you're on this planet, you might as well try to do something with it and learn. You know, that's where I look at
And
it.
that, you know, that it's we just have to continue to be a student. I totally agree. And like, so, but it also sparks another thought, like, you know, for example, like for the person who's listening to this and going, I don't even know what the hell, like where would I would begin? Like I don't even know like what my thing is as far as self-care. Like, is it yoga? Is it TRX as far as the physical? Should I start journaling? Like, you know, like I don't even know what would do me any good, because I still can remember the feeling of being like distant from your true self and not really being as connected to what you need, right? And it's like, but it goes back to what we were saying about just being kind to yourself and not being worried about imperfect action. Like just try something, like just
Right.
jump in, try, you
Well,
know,
without
like,
expectation.
give me a call, we'll try yoga. If you don't want to do that, start journaling, like whatever, like just try something. Like it's not and the idea of like, God forbid we try to have perfect self-care. Like that's not a thing. That is not a thing. It's going to be messy because it's the work, right? Like, you know, like to think it's work. It's actually becoming self, like it's hard. It's sometimes it's a bumpy road. Things might come up that don't feel quite so comfortable, but unfortunately is because there's some things you probably have to address that maybe you're not.
Well, you don't
And a
have to.
massage or a pedicure might not do the trick long term.
No, I would say that's probably more of the same as far as like avoidance goes, you know,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah. I mean,
something.
and what do they tell us mamas? Go get a pedicure. You feel better.
No, it's
Read
like I
those
know I need
pages.
somebody to watch these freaking
I
kids.
know. Oh my
In
God,
the
right?
shower and
Like,
shave
you
my
want to help
legs.
me? You want to support me? Can you come over so I
No,
can leave?
no, they
Like,
won't do that. But yeah,
no. But yeah, I mean, they might, but you got to ask. That's the thing too, is like, you know,
yeah, that's a good
you
point.
can go on and on about how, you know, and man, oh man, I'll say, you know, moms have it tough right now. I would say, like, you know, right now with this pandemic situation, if you didn't know what it was like to be a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a mom or you're a dad or you're a partner or you're just, you know, you're a parent in any way, shape, or form, now you know. Now you know. It's crazy. But anyway, it's yeah, it's been quite a road, right? And it's just, that going back to the idea of it being like a roller coaster, sometimes you just gotta ride it. And it's like this ebb and flow too. Like you're gonna have these moments, but then we always come out on the other side. We always do.
Yeah.
Craziness right now, right? But anyway, this was amazing. I can't wait to do it again. I wish we could go for another hour, but I'm pretty sure whoever's listening would be like, I gotta go.
Yeah, and my husband, I just heard his truck leave the driveway to go to football.
Oh,
So
that's
my daughter
it. I'm in. You're in.
I don't know where she is. Probably, I don't know. So I should probably check on my.
You're on borrowed time. I got it. So yeah, and I gotta go teach a class. Woohoo!
Oh.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm a night worker now. Anyway, so thank you so much, Lisa. Like seriously, I can't wait to talk with you again. And yeah, like maybe we'll go down. Well, there's so many roads we can go down, right?
So many roads.
About any of these little ticks that came up during the course. So, I love you. Have a good night. Hey, thanks for listening or watching. Hopefully you will follow or subscribe. I hope to see you back here. And if you want to find me on Instagram, it's the_aligned_heart or alignedheart.net.